Welcome back, everyone, to the Asian Voices Radio podcast, where you'll find real Asian American and Pacific Islander conversations about topics including things you were too afraid to ask your Asian parents. I'm Hula Ramos, your host, and we have a very special guest today. Her name is Wendy Kim, and we're going to learn a lot about Wendy, but just a brief bio about her. She's a #1 international best-selling author of the book Beyond Blending In, an immigrant daughter's guide to overcoming cultural bonds for a life of authenticity and abundance. She's also a professional public speaker and an empowerment coach and hosts the Beyond Blending In podcast. Please welcome Wendy Kim. Hi, Wendy.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm so excited to have you on the show because, I just love the fact that the topic we're going to talk about is something that's near and dear to my heart. And I know it's near and dear to your heart. But before we even go there, let's learn about Wendy Kim. Tell me a little bit about your life growing up and how you became Wendy Kim.
So I'm half Korean, half German. My dad is German and my mom is Korean, and they met. My father was in the military. They met in Seoul, Korea, and got married, and then moved to Georgia, of all places. And so I was born in Savannah, Georgia, and they divorced when I was quite young.
Okay.
And I ended up living with my dad for a bit, and my grandmother in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Yeah, and I definitely stood out like a sore thumb. I was always pretty much the only Asian kid in my class and in some cases in my school.
Wow.
And so definitely spent a lot of my childhood trying to blend in, hence the book.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and then when I was 11, I ended up moving to Hawaii to live with my mom and my stepdad. And I thought, oh, okay, well, people say that I tend to look more Asian. So I thought, cool, I'll be able to just be accepted and blend in this Asian culture. And actually there they said that I was too white. So
Wow.
I've actually spent a lot of my life trying to assimilate, trying to blend into those around me, and over time got to the point where I realized I just need to be myself.
Right.
So that's how the book came about, and what I do in my business.
Okay, that's fascinating. I'm so intrigued by this because, growing up Filipino, I always, am I closer to more the Filipino kids in my school, or am I closer to just everybody? I always felt a sense of I'm not Filipino enough to be with my Filipino friends. But I mean, your family members, you're half Korean and half German. Like, I mean, for you, that's just, I can't even imagine what you went through as a child.
Yeah, especially when I lived in Pittsburgh, I didn't want to associate much with my Korean background. Of course, I was familiar with kimchi, but I didn't want to eat kimchi because I, and I thought that if I rejected that part of me, that it would make me more, I guess, white and more accepted by the people around me. So I really made an effort to disassociate myself with the Korean culture until later on as I got older. And even when I was in Hawaii, I actually kind of took on that identity of not wanting to gravitate toward the Korean culture, because it was like a way to compensate for the fact that I didn't feel accepted in the Asian culture, if that makes sense. But as I got older, I came to actually appreciate that part of who I am, and now I'm so grateful to have that in my background and to be Korean American. But it was definitely a journey.
Right. And when you say, if finally accepting that side of you, like how old were you?
When I accepted that part of me?
Yeah. When you fully came to the acceptance, no, I am half Korean. I am half German. This is me.
I mean, I think it was a process. I don't think it was just like overnight, boom, I accept this part of me. I think probably, so I am going to reveal my age here.
Okay.
I
I know. We appreciate that.
I'm 43. So I would say probably in my mid 20s to late 20s is when I started to actually, and even visiting Korea for the first time is when I began to really embrace my Korean background.
So, I mean, with that being said, there's probably, I'm hoping there are some younger viewers that are, listening in and hearing their stories and maybe are going through the same struggle you went through. Do you have any, I mean, maybe words of advice or maybe, something that can kind of, talk to them specifically?
Yeah, I think when you're biracial, there is a bit of a challenge. Like I have a good friend, and she's half white and half African American, for instance.
Hmm. Hmm.
And she's dealt with the same thing growing up, where she, with her black friends, she wasn't white enough, but with her white friends they considered her black. So it's a struggle in terms of your identity.
Hmm.
And and I find that when you're young, a lot of people gravitate toward one more than another, typically one that's going to, they think, give them certain maybe privileges or advantage. But
Right.
really it's about loving you for who you are. And I think when you are biracial, you actually are so blessed because
Hmm.
you understand something about each culture, and
Hmm.
you in a sense are a bridge
Hmm.
between the two cultures. So you have a perspective and an insight that a lot of people don't get to have, which I think is really beautiful.
Oh, 100%. I've always said this because for those that don't know, my wife is Hispanic, Mexican, and
Okay.
I am Filipino, and which obviously makes my kids biracial, and they're half
Mhm.
Filipino, half Mexican. I called them my little Mexipinos. And I've always said this. I've always said that mixed children are beautiful, like so beautiful. It just, I don't know. I've just always said that, and as a parent of a child of children that are biracial, I've always told my daughters about both cultures. I've
Mhm.
always made sure they understood both cultures. We do speak Spanish to them. We do speak a little bit of Tagalog to them as well. And
Mhm.
we allow them to have, the food of, from the different cultures. But I want them to know both sides and to be
Yeah.
comfortable, because they are still young. My kids are 8 and 6, and so they have yet to experience. And granted, they're hybrid learning right now, so they're not physically in school quite yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I know eventually when she gets into her teenage years, that's going to be a thing. I think, are you going to be closer to the Filipinos or the Asians? Or are you going to be closer to the Hispanics? Like I just want my daughter to know ahead of time, almost like prepping her, like it's going to happen. So let's just get it out there in the open and be prepared.
Yeah, it's kind of cool that obviously Kamala Harris is
Mm-hmm.
now our vice president, and of
Mm-hmm.
course she's biracial, as we know, half Indian American and half African American.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think having prominent leaders who are biracial is, well, first of all, having prominent leaders who are diverse is amazing, but
Mm-hmm.
having prominent leaders who are biracial also hopefully will really inspire kids who are biracial to see themselves as, like you said, special and unique and beautiful.
Absolutely. I agree. No, it's hard because when you're a teenager, as we've all gone through it, you get into cliques and
Hmm.
it's bound to happen. But as long as like I said, as long as my kids are aware of their culture, they can make their own decisions. And obviously as a kid growing up, you have to make those decisions. And sometimes they're good decisions and sometimes they're bad decisions. But You have to go through it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know your kids are young, but do they understand even the concept of being multicultural or biracial, or are they too young to get that?
Well, my oldest, she's 8, and we constantly are, informing her and letting her know and learn about her both cultures. And luckily for me, she is interested. She's the one that asked the
Hmm.
question first. I've always said, like I said, growing up when she was getting older, I would be like, oh, she's my little Mexipino. And then she started hearing me that. And I remember vividly one day she said to me, Papa, what do you mean Mexipino? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And that's what I explained to her. It was like this made up word that I made or heard, you're both Mexican and Filipino. And um, so it's getting, she's starting to understand, and she's wanting to learn more about both cultures. With my
Yeah.
youngest one, she's 6, and she's special needs. She has an intellectual disability. So for her, she doesn't quite get the concept or know much more about it. But my 8-year-old, she definitely, is getting it. Well, I mean, like, but if you have kids,
I do.
and
I
how old
have
are they?
I have a soon to be 13, a soon to be a teenager, 13-year-old son,
Wow,
and
wow.
a 10-year-old daughter.
So they're at the tween/teen age. So I think they're entering that world because I mean, they're biracial, right? They are. What would they
Hmm.
be? Half Korean, a
Three
quarter.
quarters Korean and a quarter German. However, I was mentioning to you actually before we started the show, my husband is Korean American. However, his father was born and raised in Mexico, in the
Wow.
Yucatan. So culturally, he does definitely identify as Mexican and grew up in San Isidro, which,
Wow.
is practically, I mean, it's
Yes.
not Mexico, but you know what I mean? It's practically
Exactly.
in a
So
lot
did
of ways.
your husband grow up with like Hispanic culture?
He did very much, yeah. And he grew up exposed more to, even though his mom is from Korea, he was much more familiar with Spanish than the Korean language.
Wow. So he speaks Spanish.
He does, yes. But I mean, we do teach them about the Korean culture. We teach them about the Mexican culture, to some degree about the German culture, and yeah, I think it's really important for them to, yeah, know their background and know their heritage and take pride in it, since that wasn't something that I really grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
We I've had to actually Google and YouTube, and ask other Korean people like Kathleen, for instance, about certain cultural foods and about certain traditions, because I didn't necessarily grow up with those. So I have
Right.
had to learn those, and while I'm learning, teach my kids at the same time.
No, that's awesome. No, I love that. So do you feel like your kids are seeking that information, or are they, do you think they will be, are they in that situation that you were in when you were younger, like trying to figure themselves out as far as their culture?
Yeah, it's interesting because my son is more like how I was as a kid, where he
Mm,
just kind of wants to be like every other kid, and
mhm.
he he doesn't have in our particular neighborhood and in his school. There are some Asians, but there aren't a lot compared to other neighborhoods. So I remember when he started middle school, and previously he had never had an issue with this, but I got like sushi from the Japanese store, which on occasion, not very commonly, but on occasion I do that. They would probably, so I mean, my kids love sushi, right? And
Right.
so I sent it along with him to lunch, and he said something like, "Oh, sushi's weird," and the kids were saying they didn't like sushi, and don't send any sushi along anymore, which did make me sad because
Right.
I I kind of would have thought at this stage that that wouldn't be much of an issue.
Right.
But it's interesting because my daughter has like embraced her culture and the Asian culture so much. Like if you ask her what her favorite movie is, she'll say Crazy Rich Asians. And her like two of her favorite shows besides The Simpsons are We Bear Bears, which is actually produced by a Korean American. It's an animated show, and
Uh-huh.
then Kim's Convenience,
I
which
love that
yeah,
show.
yeah,
That is a great show based out of Canada, but it's about a Korean family with a convenience store. I love that show. It's a great show.
it is. It is. It's. I wish I had had a show like that I could have watched growing up. You know.
No, absolutely. You actually kind of hit the nail. I mean, as we're, our society's changing, and like you mentioned with our vice president, these kids. I don't want to use the term lucky, but they have the ability to see a lot more,
Mm-hmm.
to see people like themselves on TV, or to see people like themselves in leadership roles where we didn't have. Like, honestly, I only had Junior Seau. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
he's my idol. That's it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
That,
Totally.
that's interesting. So, I mean, as far as like for you, we all have to deal with if you're married the
I
infamous
know.
mother-in-laws. And for I'm just curious, is your mother-in-law like one of those, like she's from Korea, very much a Korean mother-in-law type stereotype?
Well, she is from Korea. However, I don't think she's necessarily would fit the stereotype. She is so loving and so gracious. It was interesting though because she did want Alex, my husband, to marry a Korean woman.
Okay.
So so she was actually thrilled. My sister-in-law married a man who's Mexican,
Hmm.
and she's been won over, but at the time she wasn't that happy about that. So the fact that my husband married me, a Korean American woman, she was absolutely thrilled,
Right.
and she has always been just so amazing and loving to me. That being said, with my mom, it was interesting because before my mom met my husband, like I and his family actually originally was from North Korea prior to it becoming communist, and they
Right.
escaped prior to the Korean War.
Hmm.
So I mentioned, oh yeah, Alex's dad was from Mexico, and their families were North Korea, and my mom really was not thrilled about that,
Wow.
and was quite confused, even though my mother herself married someone from a different race, but
Right.
someone white, which
Right.
unfortunately seems like that was a factor at the time. But now there's no issue there. But yeah, it's interesting these dynamics that we had to deal with when we first got engaged and married.
No, that is definitely interesting. I mean, I was, I guess, lucky in the sense that Filipinos and Mexicans, a lot of the culture is very similar. There's
Mm-hmm.
stereotypically the it's very machismo.
Mm.
The very conservative, where
The
there's a
Catholic
lot.
influence as
The
well, right?
Catholic influence is a huge thing. Yeah, absolutely. So, when I told my parents that I was dating, a Mexican woman. Their honest to God real answer, or their response to that was, well, it's about time you have a girlfriend. Because because I did the whole like career and like was trying to, do that whole thing. And I got married super late in life. Like I didn't get married until I was like 35.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were just like, oh my God, is he ever going to get married? So luckily enough for me, it was, my parents were stoked. And I know my mother-in-law is amazing. And she gets it. She's been around Filipinos and she knows the culture. She knows how much we're big into family, and their family, we are all big into family. So it was actually a nice transition for me. I'm the only one on my side of the family that married outside of the Filipino, race.
Okay.
And nobody even didn't think like no one went, oh, you only need to marry a Filipino girl. That never happened. And then same for my wife. She's the only one, well, not the only one, the first one to marry a Filipino man or outside of the Mexican race. And same,
Mm-hmm.
her family was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, cool, awesome, high five to you. Like, so we got very lucky. So it wasn't too much of an issue for us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I mean, even within a race. So if you refer to Asians as a race, like my mom would be okay. Like my mom would have been okay if I married someone Japanese American
Right.
and
Okay.
obviously Korean American, but uh she might have had more of a concern if it was someone Filipino American or Vietnamese American, which is really unfortunate and hopefully is changing. But yeah, and so we're not even talking necessarily about different races, but yeah, this is something that hopefully is really shifting now, but honestly not even that long ago was kind of a big deal.
Oh yeah, not even a long ago. Like you mentioned your age. I'm 46. I'll be
Mhm.
47 this year. So no, it just real recently, happened for me. And yeah, I think it's changing. I think as the world's getting different, it's starting to change a little bit more. But I wanted to bring up your book, Beyond Blending In.
Mhm.
Um, Tell me, what was the inspiration behind writing it? Like why write this book? What is it about? Like what's going on?
Yeah, so it's really about my journey trying to conform to what I thought other people wanted me to be and to do, and being being the good eventually when I was in Hawaii, being the good Asian girl.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I took on, and not really thinking about what I wanted for my own life and what would make me happy, and so I just kind of followed along what I thought I was supposed to do and
Mm-hmm.
what my family and what my culture told me to do until I was in my early 30s. And that's when I had my started having children,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when I thought, gosh, I am just not happy. Like I am not happy with my life. I mean, I have money and
Right.
I have a great husband and now I have these beautiful kids, but I'm I don't want to live my life like this for the rest of my life, just doing what I think other people want me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Right.
that's when I really started to explore for myself, like what do I want?
Mm-hmm.
And and I really wanted to make it, obviously become an author and impact people with my book. I actually wanted to become Oprah. and,
Oh wow.
and I thought, gosh, I don't know of any Asian American women who are doing anything like Oprah.
No, I can't
And
even think. Yeah, at the top of my head, I was like, wait, who? No, no, can't think of anyone.
like we'd been told, okay, become a lawyer, become a doctor,
Uh
become an
huh.
engineer. It's
Right.
not
Medical
like,
field.
yeah, it's not like our parents told us, yeah, become become a singer, become an actress, become an artist, become a public speaker, become a media mogul, or become like Oprah. No one ever thought that was even possible.
Right.
And so yeah, that was really why I chose to get into what I do, because I wanted uh, other Asian American women and other women of color to be able to go, oh, if Wendy's doing this, then I can do what I want to do.
No, that's great. I love that. I definitely am gonna grab a copy of your book and show it to my daughters, because I've always taught them, you know, with my family, the creative side was never encouraged. You
Right,
as
right.
at a younger, well, no, I take that back. It was encouraged when you were younger. You always had to perform in front of
Hmm.
everybody in some sort of musical instrument or some sort of, song or sing or something. But then as you got older, well, now you can't do the creative stuff. You have to get something that's, medical field, something that's, that
Productive and money
productive.
making and has status, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
And I love that, that you have that book out there for these people, for young kids, especially trying to figure themselves out.
yeah. Thank you, thank you.
Absolutely. So, but I mean, gosh, there is so much more I can talk to you, Wendy, about this. But the cool part about the show is we're gonna have you back as a co-host, and we'll get to know
Yay!
you more, and we're gonna get to know both your side and your perspective on things. So, but for those that would like to contact you in regards to your book, or find you either social media or websites, where can people find you?
Yeah, so my website is beyondblendingin.com, and you can find my Beyond Blending In book on Amazon, and also my IG is also Beyond Blending In as well.
There you go. Get her book, you guys. Let's support Wendy. Go get her book. And then that way you can, instead of, if you don't want to teach your kids about being biracial, you just hand the book over. Here you go.
That's
Here's how you
funny.
blend it. Yeah, beyond blending in. But
Yeah.
yeah, and also, like I said, Wendy will be back on other shows with us. And so you'll hear from Wendy again. Also, if you have any suggestions or future topics, we definitely want to hear from you. And you can find our link at asianvoicesradio.com. You'll also find a link to Wendy Kim there. Also, make sure you subscribe. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But Wendy, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate the conversation today.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you, Hula.
Absolutely. Until next week, I'm Hula Ramos, and on behalf of my guest, Wendy Kim, we'd like to thank you for listening. And please join us next week for another exciting and thought-provoking Asian Voices radio show. Until next time, we'll see you later.